the American Academy of Pediatrics has kind of revised their screen time guidelines, because it's not about just a 30-minute or hour-long block. It's about how you're engaging, what you're engaging with. And so I think it's more of a conscious choice. It is more work for a parent to think about those choices. And when you're just kind of handing the phone over or the tablet over, you have to realize that you're either making that decision for your child, or someone else is making it for them, YouTube or Netflix or whatever.
Right. Hello, and welcome to Ground Control Parenting, a blog and podcast for parents raising Black and brown children. I'm your host, Carol Sutton Lewis. On this podcast, I talk with really interesting people about the job and the joy of parenting. This season, I'm focusing on something many of us are trying to figure out in real time: managing the digital lives of our kids. I'm talking with researchers and experts about how technology is shaping childhood and how we, as parents, can make sense of it. And today, we're starting with one of the biggest questions parents ask: screen time. How much is too much? Are there some types of screen time that's better than others? And how should our approach change as our children grow from toddlers to teens? Because for many parents, the guidance feels all over the place. Some voices warn that screens are harming childhood, and others say that used thoughtfully, they can actually support development. And even if you want to limit screens at home, their use in school makes it almost impossible to avoid altogether. So, how should we think about all of this? To help us sort through what the research actually says and what it means for our families, I'm joined today by Jasmine Hood Miller, Director of Family Resources and Content Strategy at Common Sense Media. Jasmine leads parent advice and family engagement efforts grounded in digital equality and inclusion, and she creates resources, content, and events to support parents and caregivers. She is passionate about addressing the unique experiences and concerns of BIPOC families raising kids in a digital world. Jasmine holds a BA in Communications from Temple University and is a former board member of the National Association for Media Literacy Education. She's a busy parent to 3 boys, aged 11, 9, and 5. So Common Sense Media has spent years studying how children interact with media and technology, and I've been following its work for a really long time, and Jasmine's work for a really long time, and I'm a big fan of both Common Sense Media and Jasmine. So welcome to Ground Control Parenting, Jasmine.
Thank you so much, Carol. Thank you for having me.
Of course. I'm so happy to have you here, and I'm eager to hear about the Common Sense Media approach to screen management. So many parents, when I tell them I'm doing a series on digital life, they're like, screen time. So this is a really great one. So let's get started. So as I said a minute ago, parents hear so many conflicting messages about screens. They're harming our kids. It's modern life and the kids will adapt. And from all the research that you've seen through Common Sense Media, if you could reset the conversation for parents, what are the 1 or 2 things that you wish every parent understood about screens?
I think that when we talk about screen time, the thing that kind of gets lost, because screen time is such a big umbrella term, is that there's different types of screen time, and it's very nuanced. And so that could be, watching a movie together as a family. It could be texting and video chatting. It could be, video games or something creative. And so I think why the conversation gets so complicated is because the way that our kids are using technology and screens varies so vastly. And then, of course, there's different ages and stages of what that tech looks like in their lives. And so I think the thing that we have to kind of keep in mind is that it is going to be something, because it's in our lives, right? It's going to be something that we're constantly talking about, renegotiating as a family, thinking about, and tying to our family values, I think, is where it helps guide us along the way. But it's going to be a constant source of conversation in your household.
I love that, tying to family values. Here at Ground Control Parenting, I talk a lot about the need to establish values, and so it can keep you calm when things come up that you're not ready for. So what you're saying is, everybody take a deep breath, understand that it's going to change over time, but it's here to stay. And thanks to the research that Common Sense Media is doing, parents can have a better idea of at different stages what's good to do. So, but before we get into the specifics, what is it? What does the research say about screens and child development? Are there risks? I mean, are there risks and are there benefits?
Sure, like anything, right?
Yeah.
But especially with technology, there are risks and there are benefits. Some of the risks when you're talking about younger children is, they're in a stage where they are developing cognitive skills and language skills. And so technology can, if you're over relying on it, can kind of get in the way of those executive function skills that they're developing at that young age. There are, when you're looking at content, you want to find high quality content because there's a lot of things out there. And so you want to make sure that you're not exposing your children or that they're not getting inappropriate content that, whether it's violence or stereotypes or, just the type of images and messaging that they're getting. There's also, for young children, that ability to, they think very concrete. And so the abstract is hard. And so when they're doing, even if it's a learning or quote unquote educational app, because there's a lot of things that are labeled educational, that two-dimensional learning sometimes is hard to transfer into the real world. And so you want to make sure that they're still getting those tactile and hands-on brain, stimulating experiences. But some of the benefits are that we use them for connection. We use them to, connect with maybe family members who don't live nearby. Or, there's a lot of creative things that kids can do with different apps and platforms. And then, when we're talking about like traditional media of like movies and TV shows, there's positive representation. And so, again, it's like all of these things that you kind of can't throw it all out. It's not all good. It's not all bad. It's
right. And what about sleep? And I have to say, I'm terribly guilty. I know that we're supposed to have good sleep hygiene and have the screens far away, but it's hard. And so, what is there research about how our kids' sleep is impacted with the use of screens?
Yeah, we know that. Using screens, particularly just before bedtime, especially when we're talking about like, tablets and cell phones, have that blue light emission that is disruptive to our sleep and just the overstimulation of it. And so we know that we recommend for families that you remove the phone, at least an hour before bedtime. That you remove the phone out of the room at bedtime so that you're not having devices in the room with your children. It's even something I'm trying to practice, like putting it, maybe not on my nightstand, but across the room or something. And that's the thing too, I think for a lot of parents is thinking about how we struggle and the things that we, are trying to balance our own healthy habits and how if it's challenging for us, it's challenging for our kids. And so we want to not only model it, but be realistic and acknowledge the complexity for ourselves and with our children. And I think having conversations about that are actually very helpful.
Yeah, I want to ask you a little bit more about that because you're right. We have to model good behavior, but for many of us, screens are so incorporated into the things we do when we're not parenting, work, sort of management of a lot of different things. Sometimes screens are what enables us to be home around the kids. So talking about being realistic, what kind of conversations can you have? Because as the children get older and you're giving them one set of rules and you've got your phone in your hand while you're doing it. How do we have those conversations so our children aren't accusing us of being hypocrites?
Yeah, guilty. I think it is explaining, kind of how you're using the technology, right? I work remotely, and so I'm at a laptop in my home office, and when my kids come home from school, they see me there, and I've been on that laptop pretty much all day. But then, there are, when work is done and you close that doesn't mean screen time is over. And so it's kind of the same thing for our children. Maybe they're using devices for school, for better or worse, however you feel about that. But when they're done with their homework or they're done using that device for learning, they may want to have an opportunity to decompress or to, put on a show that they like. And so when we think about, again, our own behavior, I think it helps us be able to just relate to our children and navigate a little bit more. We still are the parents, we're still the adults, and so we need to help them set those boundaries. And it's also about, your child's temperament, where they are, what other responsibilities they have, what other activities they have going on, because you want to make sure that they have a healthy balance of that. And so as long as, it's not replacing those things, I think that there's a way to navigate. And, as you mentioned, the ages of my children, it varies, right? So I have a little one who wants to play PBS Kids, which I don't mind, but you still only need a limited amount of that, versus my older who might be working on a project on his device.
Common Sense Media talks a lot about device-free dinners. Maybe it's good for parents to think about setting some time where everybody abides by the same rule. But I agree with you. Parents are different than children, and we don't all have to always abide by the same rules. If we have conversations about, Mommy, Daddy needs to work, I need this to work, while you're having your play, I'm doing a little work. So I think you're right. The more that you talk about it, the more that you are able to create a household where you could realistically live with the requirements, the adults' requirements for devices. So I want to just kind of quickly go through the ages, because let's start with the littlest ones. I have to tell you, in New York City, I see so many people pushing the strollers and the baby's got a tablet. And it just, I'm old school. It's just sort of like, wow, they're not looking at what they're passing by in the street. So, but that could be just, since I don't have young ones, I don't understand whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm just seeing it from the outside. When we talk about toddlers and screens, what is happening in their brain? You were talking about it earlier. Is there any issue with a toddler watching a screen for a long time?
There's a few things you want to consider. You want to consider the quality of the content. We have done some research, and we know that nearly half of the respondents in the research that we did have of children 0 to 8 are watching short form videos. So that's your YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels, TikTok, those kind of things. And I think about 16% were doing it daily for about 14 minutes per day. When you think about short form video, though, that is not really for small children. Their brains are still, developing, and that quick, fast pace of those type of videos is not helpful for their attention span. And so, if you can choose something, longer form, like a Sesame Street or something like that, where they're seeing storytelling and story development, characters that they can, relate to, those are kind of the choices that you want to think about. But again, for little ones, they need that guidance. The co-viewing is also really important. So like as they're watching something, sitting with them, asking them questions while they're watching it, and being interactive during that time is how they actually process the learning. Because if they're just sitting and watching, they're probably not absorbing as much as you think they are.
And that's, you should do that even if they're really little. Even if you're not generally having a lot of conversation where they're giving a lot of back and forth, you can talk to them about what they're seeing. And
absolutely, because that's also how they develop vocabulary, and start to, even at the earliest ages, like critical thinking of like, why did they do that? Why did that character, choose that? And so you can start to have those conversations as early as possible. And then again, we have always kind of looked at the type of screen time used versus a set time limit. But even recently, I know the American Academy of Pediatrics has kind of revised their screen time guidelines, because it's not about just a 30-minute or hour-long block. It's about how you're engaging, what you're engaging with. And so I think it's more of a conscious choice. It is more work for a parent to think about those choices. And when you're just kind of handing the phone over or the tablet over, you have to realize that you're either you're making that decision for your child, or someone else is making it for them, YouTube or Netflix or whatever.
Right. So moving to the next group of kids, 4 to 8, and that seems to be where a lot of educational programming, I put in quotes because there's a lot of things that you can put on your tablet that claim that they're educational, and so. Can parents think about screens a little differently? Is that a point where kids can actually start learning from screens?
They can. They still need our guidance at that point. They still need help navigating, age-appropriate sites, privacy, and things like that. So it is hard to vet all the things that are out there. Yeah. I mean, Common Sense Media, we try to do some of that work for families, but obviously, if you have a school-issued device, the school has kind of approved whatever learning apps that they are using as part of their curriculum. And if there are other things that you want to look into, I would just, do a little research to see and ask your kid as they're using it, like, what are they learning? Kind of what, again, even if you're not co-viewing, but you're there kind of seeing how they're engaging with it. Is it just like, just scrolling and tapping, or are there's like questions and thinking that they're having to do to engage with it?
One of the wonderful things about Common Sense Media is that they give parents on their site so many different guidelines and different approaches. And parents, you can just go on the site and it'll give you questions you can ask. It'll give you more details about what to look out for. So you're not in this by yourself. You're not alone. I see in restaurants parents soothing their children with screens. And as a fellow patron of the restaurant, I'm happy with that because, you'd rather have a child sort of happily looking at a screen than really unhappily screaming at the top of their lungs. But is there any danger? Is there a point at which parents need to be careful about how often they're using a screen as sort of a pacifier of sorts?
Yeah. There's different ways that families may be using devices as as a soothing tool. And, if you have children who are neurodivergent, it may be a way to help them calm. There might be like a show or video that helps calm them down. But overall, I think that we don't want to over-rely on these, phone or a tablet or some kind of device as a kind of coping mechanism. You want to help them build other coping skills. And so in a pinch, sometimes you have to do what you have to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
But we want to help our kids, find other coping skills when they're how to sit with boredom, how to sit quietly somewhere and be patient for, a certain amount of time. Even in those situations, if you're at dinner together, how to bring them into the conversation and, have those dinner table skills. So, I know it can be easy and a quick solution, but I think there's a balance that needs to happen.
Yeah. No, I think about it because I didn't raise my children in an era where these screens were so prevalent. When they became more, when screens became part of what you could give your kids, we all thought it was a wonderful thing. I can remember vividly when they put screens in the back of cars. I thought, oh, that's amazing. Children can just stay in the car for lots of hours and be entertained. And certainly that's the case, but the consequence is they're not looking out the window.
Right.
They're really just looking at the screen. So it is, but to your point, the reality of having kids around all the time with different moods and is that sometimes there's going to be a need to calm down or just divert them from whatever they're upset about. So sometimes it's useful, but I hear you. We shouldn't sort of automatically just
right. You want to have that shared experience. If you're if you're on a road trip together, like you said, looking out of the window, like having that shared experience of driving from state to state or wherever you're going.
All the games, the license plate games,
all of those things, and so we don't want to lose those things.
Right.
But I understand sometimes it's like they don't want to listen to the music you're listening to.
Right, exactly. So moving on to the preteen years where it really gets to be a turning point. I mean, social media use, social media, but also social device use comes into play a lot. If you had to recommend just a few digital core digital habits for families, because at this point, between 9 and 12, perhaps they have their own phone, and I'm going to ask you about that in a minute, sort of the recommended ages. But if they have their own phone, they're going to have a lot of independence with what they're doing. What kind of habits should the families promote so that the kids are growing up with an understanding of there are good ways and not so great ways to use your device?
Yeah, there's this is again where conversations come in. The conversation before you get that phone, and thinking about the ways that you want or the expectations that you a family set for how they are going to manage and use that phone. But it's a period where they're kind of coming into more social interaction and caring about friendships more, wanting a little bit more independence, and making those connections with their peers. And so I think it's also a bit of understanding of like, this is the way that kids communicate. For us, it was just hanging on the phone, after school. And we were actually just recently talking about this where, kids may be FaceTiming while they're doing homework. And, is that a good thing or not? But if they're just basically kind of being there for each other virtually, is that really problematic? And so I think it's just looking at the behaviors. If you see that there is a change in your child's behavior, once they have access to that device or social media, you want to look for those kind of like red flags of, maybe less interest in activities that they had been previously, really into, or, withdrawn and things like that. But it's, talking to them. And some kids don't even want a phone yet. They don't want the responsibility of it. It's also, there's no right age, and we don't necessarily have to assume that like by this age a kid gets a phone. There's also, I think parents should talk to each other more, because what I've heard a lot from parents when we speak with schools and families is that there's, you're saying your child is telling you like they're the only one without it, but meanwhile there's actually other kids who don't have phones.
Right.
And if parents are in a community are wanting to kind of hold off or wait a little bit more until they get a little older, you can find some community there. But yeah, some kids are also opting out. They're like, I don't want the pressure of it. I don't want to like have something that's constantly like notifying me and going off all the time. And so I think some kids are actually even, starting to realize that there's trade-offs. There's the good and the bad. And so they are making some of their own choices, and families are doing that together.
We'll be right back after these messages. I am so excited to share that Ground Control Parenting is working with Donors Choose. Our work is all about supporting Black and brown children, and that means supporting the classrooms and teachers shaping their lives every day. So this season, thanks to Donors Choose, I'm giving my Ground Control Parenting guests a Donors Choose card, a gift card from Donors Choose. They can head to donorschoose.org and they can choose a classroom that resonates with them. It's such a simple way to do so much good. And trust me, the thank you notes you get from the classroom are amazing and so worth it. Thank you, Donors Choose. Welcome back to the show. What about flip phones versus smartphones? I mean, is that a thing? I mean, because if you have a flip phone, you really can't do a lot of the things. Are parents sort of returning to those as an option for their kids?
I've heard of some parents kind of like finding an old phone that they had and reactivating it. I think it's a little bit harder to kind of get your hands on some of those, but they do have, phones that are more kind of locked down, if you will, or just have very simple or dumb phones, as they call them, simple features that don't have all the access that a smartphone has. And I think it's a good way to start if you feel like you want to be able to, reach your child, have a communication with them when they're out, at school or at activities, but don't necessarily want to hand them over all of the access of being online and social media. And so there are lots of families who are starting with that, or smartwatches are another option.
Yeah, I was thinking about that in terms of the conversations that parents are having about when their child gets a phone, because from a parental perspective, it's nice to be able to know, particularly if your child is getting to the point where they operate or travel independently, there is some sense of security that you have some means of being in touch with them.
Right.
And so sometimes a phone is a good thing to have for the basic phone use of it.
Exactly.
And so perhaps there is that option. But as you say, a smartphone, you're handing over the world to your child. So I'm sure there will be lots of kids that say, no one else has this phone. But again, talk to other parents. Maybe other parents are thinking the same thing. So teenagers, by the time kids are teenagers, what works? Does anything still work when it comes to helping them develop healthy digital habits?
I mean, I think when you get to the teenage years, you are able to have obviously more kind of sophisticated conversation with your teen around their habits, what they're feeling, how does it make you feel if you've been on your phone, whether you're scrolling for an hour, or how do you feel when you've seen certain things, and kind of help them process and start making their own choices about, what feels good to them. And, still, even for teenagers, they still need and want, actually, teens have told us in our research that they still want guidance from their parents. They want to be able to ultimately kind of make their own decision and choice, but they're still looking to us. And they know that the way that a lot of, platforms and tech companies are set up, that it's not necessarily in their best interest, that there are harmful aspects to some of these platforms. And so they look to it for all the things that we all do, like the connection and kind of staying up on things. But they also know that sometimes they need to take a break from it, and that it's not really designed for them to kind of disengage, but that they have to be kind of conscious of that. And so just those critical thinking questions and skills that we want to continue building with our teens.
Yeah, no, I think that what you've said earlier about conversation, that continuing the conversation with your child, but in a more kind of empathetic perspective. The good news is that tech has been around, the smartphones have been around long enough for, as you say, even kids to understand the downside. If you have a social media account, I mean, you understand that people can be bullies, and you understand that there are downsides. You understand that constant notifications can distract you, and as a teenager, you have work to do. And I mean, so the good news is that, as you say, teens are starting to self-regulate because the novelty is worn off, and it's no longer just one big golden opportunity. I mean, I think the pandemic really, unfortunately, made us so dependent on our screens. But the only good things now that we've seen how deep you can go, and now people are trying to pull out of that and be less attached. So I do think the more you talk to your child about that, and perhaps not with a authoritative, like you should do this or that, but to try to get them to sort of talk about how different things feel, it would be helpful. So with respect to teenagers, though, one of the things that parents really focus on, I'm told, is the sort of the concept of monitoring them versus trusting them. And as I said earlier, if you have children, even younger children, and they're independent, you kind of want to know where they are. Now, it's really easy to know where people are if you have their phone. And in my family, for example, we all track each other. We're all adults. And I was the last one to get on that train, but we all track each other. And I noticed that my adult children, their friends all track each other. It's not a tracking. It's more just like, I'm in this neighborhood, oh, so my friend's there as well. Okay. But with teenagers, I'm sure parents appreciate the tracking function because they just want to know where they are, and the teens may push back because they feel they're not being trusted. How do you have those kind of conversations?
I think, it is kind of a tricky thing because as a parent, you want to make sure your child is safe. You want to know where they are.
Right.
And it's very easy to do that now with these options. But I also know that teens need space to make mistakes, to kind of, stretch. I know that there are some teens who feel that you're kind of like constantly under surveillance if you're always, everywhere you are, someone knows. And obviously as a parent, like it is coming from a good place. But teens also need the space to kind of, do the things that we did when we were teens and, make mistakes and figure out how to fix it and get through it without necessarily constantly having this like presence over you. And so that is, again, every family is different. If you have concerns or there's something about, and it could be one of your children and not the other. It's also different, even within the same household, where you want to kind of keep that, those tabs on your kids a little more closely and then maybe gradually, start to allow them more space. But it is a matter of trust. And I think you have to start to, they have to earn it. We have to develop it together. It is, again, more conversation. And I think that's just kind of like the, the through line here is that it's conversation from early, little, all the way through. Yes. And so it is not a set it and forget it or one and done kind of thing.
Right. I imagine that it's helpful as we're having these conversations with our teenagers to sort of set the rules of engagement when you're talking about the tracking part of devices, because I know in my family with my adult children, it is a rule. I never just sort of see where they are and reach out to them and say, oh, I see you're there, because it does feel like it's an invasion of their privacy. It's only if we're going to meet up somewhere or and I need to know where they are that I mention to them that I can see where they are. And so I think families need to talk about when you get to use this function, as it's not designed to just, as you say, become this little hovercraft that follows the child everywhere they go, and then the parent tells the child, I know where you were. That's where the trust, I think, gets eroded. And you're right. Teenage years, you do things, you experiment, you push boundaries a little bit. I mean, you're supposed to. That's how you grow. Right. You can't grow if you don't make the mistakes you want to make safe mistakes, but it is, I agree. I'm saying this to remind parents that while it's really tempting, if you and your child have agreed about this tracking function, it's tempting to really use it. But I mean, you can look at it as often as you want, but the extent to which you talk to your child about it, I think, has to be regulated.
And you can help them make choices too. Maybe we as a family, we track each other, but maybe you don't want to share your location with all of your friends, right? And so like they can, have some liberty to make some of those choices too. I also think about just, culturally, if someone knew exactly where I was when I said I was, if I was supposed to be meeting someone somewhere and like, oh, you actually haven't left the house yet.
Exactly.
So it's just like, I don't know if I want someone to know that if I say I'm 5 minutes away.
Exactly. Now, I am not the most on-time person, and I do not want. I don't want my cover to be blown.
Exactly.
So the next two things I want to ask you about could be episodes all by themselves, but they relate to teens a lot, and that's social media and games, online games. And with the social media piece, is that a separate conversation? Is that separate from me? Because screens are all screens, but social media has its own issues and difficulties in terms of how much it shapes the way your child is feeling about themselves. Does it all essentially get back to the conversations that you need to have?
For sure. I mean, we want our kids to be able to come to us and talk to us if they are seeing things that, don't sit right with them. If they are experiencing things on social media that they're having a difficult time with, whether it's you or another trusted adult. And so you want to be able to at least let them know that it's okay if something doesn't sit right, and we can talk about it, whether it's seeing, toxic comments on social media, really disturbing images, because now everything is just on there, whether they're looking for it or not. And so it could be something from the news, or it could be, a content that's just in their feed because of the algorithm that like is not really something that they want to be exposed to, but it's there. When it comes to things like body image and all of these things. And so you want to encourage them to have an ability to come to you, also to know how to flag things, when, or report things on these platforms, when to kind of walk away, how to, manage and navigate those kind of situations. And then it's kind of similar for video games, with the chat features and things like that. If there's someone who's making you uncomfortable, or, a situation where it's, just doesn't feel right, to be able to know how to remove yourself, report the incident if there is one, come to you. And so those are the things we want them to know how to do.
It may not be the case now that parents don't know a lot about video games, but when they first came out, dinosaur that I am, when they first came out, it was tempting to just let your children sort of play. They were playing with their friends, but come to find out they're actually playing with strangers, and strangers are saying ridiculously inappropriate things, or have the ability to say really inappropriate things. So this is just for any parent who is not sort of up to speed on video games. You should just know that perhaps co-viewing a video game once or twice even with your teen, just to sort of ask them to show you how it works, whatever. You need to just understand what that interaction is. I mean, if your kid's a teenager and they're a gamer and they play all the time, I'm sure that they have managed how they manage the negative comments, but it's worth knowing that and having those conversations, because some of us were clueless that it was a possibility of somebody saying crazy things.
Yeah, it didn't start off that way, right? The chat feature wasn't a thing.
Right.
When video games first came out. But, being able to play online with friends. And so I think it's important to kind of understand the platform, to know what the parental control settings are, and things like that. If you are just playing, at home versus opening it up to playing with friends that they may know, versus, opening it completely up to playing with strangers. And so you want to know what those features are and how to set them. And you want to, scaffold that as they get older.
Yeah, that's really important. You have to know that there are options, because I'm sure your child won't tell you, here's a way you can limit my viewing or my playing. Okay, so if a parent that's listening to us or watching us feels like, oh my gosh, it's out of control already, I'm sunk. If they've already gotten out of control in the household and they're feeling guilty about it, what would you say to them? I mean, guilt is, to my mind, the most unnecessary emotion in parenting. It's not helpful at all. But how can parents feel better about where they are right now, wherever they are?
We're all in this, right? And we reset in my house all the time. So, we start off with like, okay, this is the arrangement of, what you can use, when you can use it. And then it may not be working as well as we had hoped. So we'll sit and we'll talk about it and kind of rearrange. And so I think resetting is totally okay. And if you feel like you've kind of gone too far down one way, you can kind of come together and, recalibrate, and that's okay. I think also explaining to your kids, I'm kind of a big proponent of this, of explaining to my children why we're making the decision. My husband and I are making the decisions we are about, their screen time use. For example, YouTube, we only allow YouTube on the TV in the living room. Like, they're not allowed to do, at this age, do YouTube on their own. And we explain why, because it's very easy for you to, come across things that are not appropriate and so on. And so I think having the ability to talk it out with your kids and not just like set the rule and that's it, is also really helpful, even if they're teenagers.
No, I think that has definitely been the through line, as you say, for this conversation. And parents, however you enter into this conversation, you should continue to have it. I mean, I hope we're past the time where parents are just like, I don't want to have anything to do with that. I mean, we can't afford to be that way. But so just to wrap up here, if you could give, it sounds like we've already done this, parents one guiding principle about raising kids in a digital world, would it be the conversation? Or
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think the thing that we all want to raise happy, healthy, safe children, right? The kind of essential skills that we at Common Sense are looking to develop in young people is human connection, creativity, curiosity, and critical thinking. And so if you kind of use that as your baseline of like, how's my child engaging with this media, this tech, this app, whatever it is it supporting those skills? That's kind of a helpful guideline.
Can you say them again, the things that you focused on?
Human connection, curiosity, creativity, and critical thinking.
Great.
And so that is kind of like the guidelines that I'm looking for when I'm thinking about, choosing media and tech for my children, or helping them choose it for themselves. And that is where the conversations come in, because you can encourage those things through conversation. You can build those skills. You can foster those skill sets and that growth mindset of, it's not just all about the bad, but we're making these choices because we want you to have a positive experience.
And as you said, sometimes you can get to all of those four things: connection, curiosity, creativity, and critical thinking through a screen. But it can be helpful.
Yeah.
But it's also important to be able to do that away from a screen.
For sure.
Yeah.
It's about balance.
Right.
It's about being able to know that you're making those tech choices with those in mind, but there's lots of ways, like you said, to do that offline or, through other types of activities. And so you want to make sure that there's that balance.
So as we wrap up, I've got to give the hugest shout out to Common Sense Media, which again, I used it when my kids were young, and I rely on it for so much information now. So how can people who aren't familiar with the amazing site of the amazing world of Common Sense Media, how can they find your resources? You've got AI toolkit, you've got all these really great things.
Yeah, so everything is on our website at commonsensemedia.org. We're also on social, on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube, all those channels. But yeah, we also have an app that parents can download, and that gives you our media ratings and reviews right at your fingertips. We also have our parent advice within that app. And so we are trying to kind of just meet families where they are, be able to kind of be there to help them think, prepare their children, but also be there when, things come up and like, how do I respond to this, and have those kind of solutions and recommendations. And that,
it is, I have relied on it for many years, but I also, at Ground Control Parenting, I'm always focused on things that can help calm parents and give them the sense of confidence to parent. And Common Sense Media has so many things on its site, from the ratings to these scripts almost as to what you can do, what you can ask about. It also reviews all the different games and tells you what's the great thing about this game, what's the not, as what we have to be watchful for. And what I like most about it is it's not anti-tech.
No.
It's just, it acknowledges that tech is here and parenting is still critical, and here's how you can do both. Here's how you can really make your way through this sort of brave new world of technology. So
yeah.
I can't say enough good things about that. So I'm going to stop here. There are so many other conversations that we could have on so many different levels. But for now, I'll stop here and I'll say thank you so much, Jasmine. And it's been a great conversation, as I knew it would be. But before you go, you have to, I would love for you to play what I ask all my guests to play, which is the GCP lightning round.
Okay.
So I have 4 quick questions for you.
Okay.
Number 1, your favorite poem or saying?
This is an anonymous quote, but if it looks good to the world but doesn't feel good to your soul, it's not success.
If it looks good to the world. Say that again.
If it looks good to the world but doesn't feel good to your soul, then it's not success at all.
I like that. It's not success. Okay. Hopefully this will be easy with all of your guys. Your favorite 2 children's books, and they could actually be books that you grew up with, or books that you liked, that they liked, and you liked reading with them.
I don't know if they're my favorite, but they're the ones I get asked to read a lot. There's Llama Llama Red Pajama.
I was about to say, from the look on your face, Llama Llama Red Pajama is a big hit. You could probably recite it. I won't ask you to.
Yes, I probably could.
So do the 11 and 9, 11, 9, and 5?
Yes.
Do the older ones read with the little one?
Yes, we still read together. They read to each other, but at end of the night, I still read to them at night.
Oh, each of them?
Yeah, I think it's important, even for for older kids. That we do co-readings. Sometimes like where they read a passage, I read it. We take turns. But I also just like to get them all together and snuggle up and read. So
yeah, no, I like that too. I like reminding the older ones that the little one.
Yeah, because I know at some point they won't want to do it, so I'm trying to hold on as long as I can.
I remember forcing my older ones to watch Sesame Street with the baby.
Yeah, that they won't do. I try, they won't.
So 2 more quick questions. Give me a mom moment that you would want to do over differently. Not that was so great that you want to do it again.
Well, funny enough, I've worked at Common Sense Media for a long time, for 15 years. I know all the things. But when my oldest was smaller, I think maybe like 5 or 6, he had my phone, and he had gone through, he was looking, I think, at a YouTube video. And this is like literally me learning in real time, in real life, not just, in theory. And inadvertently got onto, or came across some content that was really inappropriate. And it really broke my heart, because I was just like, he was just looking for his character or whatever that he was looking for. And so that kind of stuff is out there, and that it's so easy for kids to access was hard. But then I was like, okay, I'm in mode now. I have to make sure I'm on top of this, and put all of those things into practice. And so that was, as much as I know, I wish I had prepared myself even more to make sure all of those things were locked down.
Right. And so give me a mom moment that you nailed it, where you just nailed it as a mom.
I think just seeing my kids together, like I said, like the older 2 help with the little one. They read to him. They are just a cool little bunch of guys. I have 3 boys, so I love watching them together.
Yeah. No, it's good. As a fellow mom of 3, there's nothing better than when they're all together. Those are great lightning round question answers. Thank you so much, Jasmine, for being here.
Thank you so much, Carol. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I hope everyone listening enjoyed this conversation, that you'll come back for more. Please subscribe, rate, and review where you find your podcasts, and tell your friends. For more parenting info and advice, please check out the Ground Control Parenting website at www.groundcontrolparenting.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram at Ground Control Parenting, and on LinkedIn under Carol Sutton Lewis. Until the next time, take care, and thanks for listening.